Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel. And today we're going to look at the top 16 decks from the recent Kyoto Champions League. Now, unfortunately, we don't have every single deck from the top 16 posted yet. It has been a few days now. We haven't gotten every deck yet. And I was going to wait on it and look at all the decks that got top 16, but they haven't all been released yet. And I didn't want to take too long to get this video out. So I decided let's just look at the decks that we see and have access to at this current moment in time. Now, there are some pretty wacky and crazy cards that did get top 16, some decks that I would not have expected to see, and some cards that I would never have expected to see do this well in a tournament. I'm excited to look at each deck, kind of give the rundown on them, and see what's up with some of these wacky decks here that did well. Now, if you are new here to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We are very close to 10,000 subs. We're like 30 away now from 10K or something like that. So if you want to help me reach 10,000 subs, make sure to subscribe down below. It'd be greatly appreciated. And leave a like if you want to enjoy the video. I will leave a link down below to Palkia Book if you want to go check out these deck lists yourself, because it's not up on Limitless yet, which I'm sure they will be eventually. But I'll leave a link to Palkia Book. It's where I get all the Japanese results. So yeah, the Champions League was big. I'm pretty sure it had over like 3,000 players in it or something like that. So it was a massive tournament. Now, keep in mind they do play best of one, so it is a bit different for them in terms of their format, because they, like I said, they play best of one, not best of three like we play. So the deck that won the tournament was a Zone Kyogre deck. Now, that's a deck that I didn't really expect to see win the tournament, because Kyogre I don't think is like super popular right now, but I think Kyogre can still win a lot of games, because Kyogre just beats all these big basic decks. Like when you're playing against Miraidon, when you're playing against Roaring Moon, which did do good in this tournament, Kyogre can be a great deck. And then, of course, just this like paradox toolbox deck of attackers with Roaring Moon and Iron Hands makes for a pretty good replacement for like the Dragonite Raikou package it used to play within the Lost Zone Kyogre deck. Now, some things to note about this list. Again, it does play a lot of one-ofs. Plays one Sableye, one Cram, one Greninja, one Moon, one Hands, one Raikou. It does play that Ditto. Now, Ditto's really strong. Ditto allows you to essentially have like a 5th Comfy in your start. Like you can basically, it counts as the 5th Comfy because its ability lets you get a Comfy out of the deck. Not only does it let you get a Comfy, it also thins out the deck by 1 card to grab the Comfy. So it's actually kind of useful in that regard. So it's kind of like a mini nest ball in a way. And the deck does, of course, play the one of Sableye, which is interesting because a lot of like Lost Zone decks now are kind of either cutting the Sableye, like that super effective Glasses deck only plays 1 Sableye or 0 Sableye, or now they're just playing like 1 Sableye, just because Jirachi is really popular. And this deck leans into more of the big attackers. It does play the Raikou with the Forest Seal Stone, wanting to play some kind of V Pokemon. It makes sense. Surprised it's not maybe Dragonite over Raikou, but Dragonite's a bit more high maintenance in its energy cost, where Raikou you just need to just play a Mirage Gate. And as long as there's light energy in your deck or whatever, it's essentially powered up in a single turn. But yeah, Kyogre is definitely strong right now. It's kind of under the radar in my opinion, but I think Kyogre is still like a really strong card right now, and it's definitely cool to see it do well, because I think the card has the potential to do well, because I think Kyogre is just really good. Now, the deck that got second place was Darkrai VSTAR in Roaring Moon. So Roaring Moon definitely is another deck right now that not many people are really playing. It has actually been getting like okay results recently, though, in some of the recent regionals that we've had. So it is kind of on the bubble right now, but it did get second place here in the Champions League. And it is a very interesting build. So you're playing Darkrai VSTAR in the deck, a card that we don't usually see much in Roaring Moon right now. And then, of course, it's also playing a different engine. It's playing cross receivers and cross switchers. So the idea behind the cross receiver is you play 2 from your hand at once. You can either put, I think it's a Pokemon or a supporter card from your discard pile back into your hand. So it essentially gives you like a free, it's like a free Versus Seeker for your Saudas or your one of Boss or even your one of Iono. And then the cross switchers, well, we all know Roaring Moon likes her cross switchers. The only thing about this build is it's not playing the water energy with the Radiant Greninja, so it's not trying to take advantage of the Greninja attack on option, but it does just have more more consistency with the cross receiver, because now all of a sudden you have another out to your Sada, because it does play Pokestop. And one of the things, you know, when you're playing the Roaring Moon deck, and one of the reasons why a lot of the Roaring Moon decks that we've been seeing do well have been playing Town Store over Pokestop, because Pokestop can be pretty bad sometimes. Sometimes you mill, you know, Moons, or you mill your supporters. I mean, I've seen the classic, you know, mill 3 Sadas, right? So it's like a pretty annoying card to play sometimes, and sometimes it gets you 3 items, sometimes it discards important resources that you needed. So So the idea of the cross receiver kind of checks that off. It's like even if you Pokestop away a good card, you always have the cross receiver to get it back. You have Darkrai V-Star, which can not only attack, but it also uses that V-Star power, which allows you to put 2 items back. So you can use it to get back 2 cross receivers. So Darkrai's V-Star power essentially turns into a free Sada or like a free boss or something, which is kind of cool. So definitely a worthwhile inclusion. I mean, I've seen Darkrai and Roaring Moon before, but to see it do this well is definitely interesting because everybody before was not really playing the Darkrai V-Star in the Roaring Moon deck. But definitely a really interesting Roaring Moon list here. It's pretty consistent. I like it. Will it be the one that replaces the Town Star builds we've been having do well? Potentially. We'll have to see because I think that this build does have some merit to it. Next up are the top 4. Now, the interesting one is in top 4. We had a Gholdengo deck. Now, Gholdengo has not yet had the performance that we've wanted to. I'm pretty sure we haven't even seen a Gholdengo in day 2 yet at any regional we've had. However, now Gholdengo has a result over in Japan. Now, this build is playing Palkia V-Star. Now, I got the idea of Palkia. Now, in fact, when I looked at like early Gholdengo lists, I think, a while back before Paradox came out, we were looking at these like Palkia Gholdengo decks, and I was like, I like that. So Palkia, it's a great early game attacker. One of the things with Gholdengo is Gholdengo, like in the early game, sometimes struggles to get going because it's a bit slower. You're not able to find your energy as consistently. But when you have the Palkia V-Star, you can have a really good early game attacker with Palkia instead, and all of a sudden you're doing subspace swell and putting on a ton of pressure early on in the game. So like if you're playing against like Charizard, for example, you can lead with Palkia and then you can kind of lean into the Gholdengo in the later part of the game when you've seen more energy and you're able to use its attack harder in the late game. The other cool thing with Palkia is it does enable you to use Radiant Greninja as an attacker. Like if I'm playing against Gholdengo, I'm not benching Manaphy, but when I'm playing against Palkia Gholdengo, it's like, oh, if I don't bench Manaphy, I can get Greninja'd. So definitely can provide some extra bit of annoyance to the opponent with the Greninja. Now, the other thing about the deck is it plays a 1-1 Milotic line. Now, Milotic's a really cool card. It's got that ability where essentially you can't get Iono'd or Roxanne or judged. Your hand cannot be disrupted until Milotic gets knocked out. So I think Milotic's a cool inclusion. Gholdengo's another deck that can be crippled pretty hard by Iono, especially Iono Path to be exact. And this deck plays 4 Worker, 4 Pokestop. It has 8 path bumps and the Milotic, so you can't like get Iono'd Path out of the game. And the Milotic is a cool idea because a lot of the time Gholdengo is just building up a large hand. I mean, with its own ability, with Radiant Greninja, you're drawing, a lot of cards a turn. With Worker too, like you're drawing into a big hand. Like a lot of the time, after you've done your big attack to discard a lot of energy, your hand is still going to be fairly large, and getting Iono'd can be pretty awkward and can sometimes disrupt your flow, and then that can lead you to losing the game. But when the Milotic's in play, you don't get your hand disrupted. So the Milotic's definitely a cool inclusion. Definitely a bit of a weird list because there's no scissor or anything, but I do like it. I think the Palkia is a really smart idea. Palkia might seem like a bit of a weird inclusion, but I mean, I don't know. The idea of just playing Palkia with another attacker doesn't seem all that bad because Palkia is just a really strong aggressive attacker. It creates some really good situations where your opponent's forced to find Manaphy. Yeah, I like it. I think it's a really cool inclusion. That there's a reason why we're seeing all of these weird like Palkia decks do well, and that's because it's just a really strong. It's just a very strong, like easy to play attacker. Like you just play some Water Energy and then play Greninja, and all of a sudden you can use Palkia. So I think it's a cool inclusion. There was a Fusion Mew, or a Double Turbo Mew, sorry, here in top 4. Now this one, like the ones from San Antonio, we're playing the 2 of Fusion Energy, so there's no Meloetta or anything like that, no Sparkles, but it does play a couple Fusion Energy, mainly just there for Spiritomb, because you're playing Double Turbo Mew. Spiritomb is harder to beat over playing the Fusion build, because with Fusion you can use Sparkle, and all of a sudden Tomb's not that bad. But when you're playing Double Turbo, Fusion Mew Spiritomb, really hurts you. But when you have the Fusion Energies, you can try to counter that, and that's why we are seeing a couple of Fusion Energy here in the Double Turbo Mew list. It's a pretty standard list. There's no shenanigans like grabbers or catchers or crushing hammers, but it is playing some more tools. It's got 4 tools. It's got like Belt, Cleansing Gloves, and 2 Box of Disaster. It's also playing an Avery in the deck for that extra bit of disruption. And as you can see, we don't have the entirety of the top 8 posted, but we do have some other decks. Like we do see the Urshifu Valiant deck. I did a video on this deck over on the main channel a few days ago, which apparently I might not have played that well after reading some of the comments. I was like, oh, maybe I could have played the deck better, or maybe I missequenced it. This deck is kind of a brain buster to play. It is Rapid Strike Valiant, a deck that I think I honestly still will say is kind of secretly broken. It's a deck that has been getting some top 32 placements and now has this like breakthrough top 8 placement at the Kyoto Champions League. This deck's a lot better than people are giving it credit for. And I think that it's kind of a deck that nobody's really playing when they probably should. Because I think this deck has potential. I think it's a very strong deck. After playing it for the video, I realized, yeah, this deck is pretty darn good. Urshifu with Valiant is a strong deck. To see it get top 8 definitely is really cool to see. And we'll have to see if this deck can go well over in America next. But I like the list. Again, I think the list is pretty good with what I played with in the video. A lot of supporters in the deck. That's like the one thing you'll notice. This deck plays a ton of supporters. It's playing 11 supporter cards, which is not something you usually see in a deck, but yeah, 11 draw supporters, 4 research, 3 Iono, 3 Colress, 1 worker. It is not trying to brick. And you kind of need to not brick when you're playing a deck like this, because this is a very flow chain heavy deck. You're snowballing. You're trying to constantly do things every turn, and when your opponent's, Iono you into like 2 cards, you're bricking, it's not a good thing. So I do still like the idea of the supporters. This is probably the craziest deck. I don't know. Is the Gholdengo deck the craziest deck? This might be the craziest deck that got top 8. It was an Arc Zeraora Pikachu deck. So what the heck is going on here? How did an Arc pile do this well? How did an Arceus Zeraora deck do well? Zeraora VMAX/VSTAR hasn't really seen any competitive success since its release last year. So how on earth did the deck do this well? Well, let's take a look what the deck is. So yeah, it's an Arc pile. And Arc piles have been creeping back into the format now. Now that we've been kind of seeing the format stabilize, Arc piles can now come back. And I think that Arc is fine right now. I don't think Arc is a bad deck. It is like a decent deck with like Charizard's popularity. You're okay into it. Your worst matchups are always going to be like Giratina VSTAR, and you're probably going to struggle into yeah, Giratina for sure. I was trying to think. Rapid Strike, that was the other one. Yeah, Rapid Strike's the other bad matchup. But Arceus definitely still is fine. I mean, it beats a lot of other things. Miraidon might be a little sketchy too, but this build is playing at some countermeasures. So it is playing at Zeraora VMAX. Now, it has the attack where for 2 Lightning Energy, which I think might be the main reason why this is played, it does 60 damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play with an ability. So if your opponent has like 4 abilities in play, you're doing 240 damage for 2 energy, which is pretty good. And not only that, you have Zeraora's other attack, that for 3 energy, just 240 damage. So you kind of just have this nice big VMAX beat stick Pokemon that doesn't really need a lot of energy. Now, Zeraora's other attack, I'm pretty sure when it does 240, you have to discard 2 energy from it, which is a bit of a trade-off, but I do like the idea of the Zeraora VMAX in the deck. But when you're playing the VMAX, you might as well play the VSTAR too. Now, the VSTAR is not as good as the VMAX in terms of raw damage. Its main attack for 3 energy does 190 damage, and you discard a stadium in play. But I think the main reason why you'd play the VSTAR is for the VSTAR power. Now, Starbirth is still really good, and I feel like maybe, not even maybe, maybe like 73% of the time, you're going to have to do Starbirth anyways. But Zeraora VSTAR has a crazy VSTAR power, which for 4 energy, you can essentially spread 60, you can do 240 damage to like across the board, or like to whatever Pokemon you want. So you do 60 damage, and you can play 60 damage on a Pokemon 4 times, or you can spread it 4 times. So essentially, you can spread 240 damage to, whatever during that turn. So you can go 60 here, 60 here, 60 here, 60 here. So you're basically spreading 60 damage 4 times across the board. You can put it all in one Pokemon. If you want to go 240 Snipe, you can go 180, 60, or you can go 120, 120. But that's basically what Zeraora VSTAR does. Now, I've seen it be used before in like Miraidon. I'm pretty sure I've done a video on Zeraora Miraidon too. It's a really fun card to play, and it's actually not bad when you're playing against a deck that doesn't have Manaphy. Maybe something like Giratina is where you want to use this, because against Tina, they'll path you can't do Starbirth, but then what you can do is you can do that V-Star power and set up all the Pokemon to be KO'd. And then, of course, the Flying Pikachu. I'm a big fan of Flying Pikachu. I think Flying Pikachu is still okay. Essentially, it's just a basic wall Pokemon, or wall's basic Pokemon, I should say. It does 160 damage, right? And then basic Pokemon can't attack it. And in a meta right now where even the Lost Zone decks are starting to cut Sableye, which is a big deal for Pikachu, Pikachu is a little hard to KO. Now, the only thing I will say about it is decks are, Lost Box can play Counter Catcher. Like, they can go, like, Rope Counter Catcher, which is a little awkward. But I get the idea of playing the Pikachu. It's also not bad into stuff like Miraidon, where Miraidon doesn't really have a great way to deal with it. Like, yeah, they'll maybe play like a Rope Boss combo, but how often are they going to pull off a Rope Boss combo when you're playing 4 Iono and 3 Judge, when you're just constantly disrupting their hand? Will they ever find that? That's going to be the question. And, I mean, it's good into, like, maybe other things. Pikachu's not great into Roaring Moon, however, because Roaring Moon can Frenzy Gouging you, even if you do Max Balloon. But it's a bit of an anti-meta deck. Some other interesting inclusions, there's a Canceling Cologne in the deck, which I'm pretty sure is just there for the Mimikyu, which I guess makes sense. I'm pretty sure it would be just there for, like, Mimikyu and stuff. It's also playing a Force Seal Stone, Another very kind of weird inclusion is that when you're playing Arc V-Star, do you really need the Forest Seal Stone? Well, it makes sense. If you path yourself or get path, you still have access to a mini Starbirth, which I guess can make sense in some regards. A really interesting 60. Will a deck like this do well over in America and stuff? I'm not too sure because it is definitely, I don't know, it feels like it's a little weird, but maybe there is something to it. I mean, the Zeraora is a smart idea, and when you're having these big lightning beach sticks, it can make sense. So I don't know. We'll have to see if a deck like this does well, maybe in an online tourney or something, but it's cool to see, and I'm always a big fan of Arc Piles. Next up, we got the top 16. We do have a Charizard in top 16 here. It looks like it is essentially like the San Antonio Azul-winning Charizard list with the 2 counter catchers, the Rotom. The tools are a little bit different, though. It's playing a Defiance Band and a TM Devolution. Now, TM Devolution is an interesting tech card, mainly just there for, like, the mirror match, right? Where you're in the mirror, you can TM de-evolve their Pokemon, and in a best of 1, that can definitely win you games because you're not playing best of 3. And I think that's kind of where you'll see, like, these results happen is like you're in a best of 1 scenario, not a best of 3. So when you're playing a TM Devolution and your Charizard deck in a mirror match, your opponent's not going to expect you to play it, and then you can just kind of use it on them, and it's like, oh shoot, I didn't expect that. And that's where like the best of 1 can really shine for the Charizard deck here. We got a Giratina in top 16. Looks like a pretty standard list. It is playing a Cleansing Gloves, however, which is a bit different, but it's not bad into like Guardi and stuff. Mew VMAX, obviously. There's an ArcTina that did well. Now, this ArcTina list is also pretty interesting. It's playing 15 energy, so it's really not trying to miss that turn energy. And it is, like, just a very straightforward list. It's, like, super consistent with what it's doing. It's got 15 energy. It's got the Arcs, it's got the Tinas, the Bibs, the Squovit. No Spiritomb is a little weird. I definitely think a Spiritomb would probably be good in here. But the one thing to note is it's playing 4 Iono and 4 Judge and 4 Boss for the draw and for the supporters. I mean, it's got 1 Raihan. But yeah, there's no Avery, no Research, no Charon's Care. Just opting for 4/4 of Judge and Iono as your draw cards. And that's a lot of the time what you're trying to do with ArcTina is you're just trying to use cards like Judge and Iono, and you're just trying to spam them. Specifically Judge in the early game. You know, you want to be able to go Judge Path. This deck plays 4 Judge and 4 Path to the Peak. So it's really trying to capitalize on the Judge Path combo. It's also playing a Captain Aroma because it's really trying to get that extra little bit of basic out there. And I kind of like the idea of a Captain Aroma. You're either going to use it to find like a V turn 1 if you're lucky, or you can get a V star turn 2. It's not a terrible card to play by any means, because sometimes, you know, when you're just playing like Ultra Balls and stuff, you play a Judge and you're like, oh, I just got a handful of like nothing, and crap, I can't get Bibarel and play. What am I going to do? When you have like that extra bit of Pokemon search, it does help you out. It's a pretty cool ArcTina list. I think a Spiritomb would probably still be really good in here. If I were to make any change to the list, I would probably put a Tomb in the deck. Maybe cut an energy, but I don't know. 15 energy isn't bad. I mean, the more energy you play in an Arc pile, the higher chance you're getting that turn 1 energy arc that you're trying to do. And then, of course, we have Guardian top 16 too. A pretty straightforward Guardi list. The one thing to note is it does play that Moonlight Hill Stadium, which we've looked at before in these Japan Guardi lists on the channel. But yeah, the Moonlight Hill we don't have yet. I'm pretty sure it's coming out in Paldean Fates, which is going to be like a month away now. So it's going to be coming very soon. And it's definitely going to make Guardi pretty good. Basically, you discard a Psychic Energy from your hand, and then you can heal 30 damage from each of your Psychic Pokemon or something like that. So it basically allows you to put more energy on a Shining Arcana Gardevoir. And that's why you can see there's 3 Shining Arcana Guardis in the deck, is because the Moonlight Hill Stadium allows you to heal it and then put more damage. You put more energy on it because you're healing it, and then you can put... It's not... You can't use it with Screamtail, but you can use it with Guardi, and that's why the Moonlight Hill is going to be a very powerful card when it releases. It's definitely going to make an impact in Guardi. Guardi might actually become... I don't know about S tier, but potentially it'll go back to, like, BDIF status when Moonlight Hill comes out, because it is just a huge upgrade of the deck. Being able to attack with that Gardevoir is nuts, and that's just one of the strong things about it. And then I guess in the Seniors Division, we saw Rapid Strike win the tournament here. It is playing a counter catcher, not something you usually see in the deck, but sometimes Rapid Strike doesn't usually try to take prizes. It tries to set up, you know, yoga loops and stuff, and you can abuse counter catcher, so I kind of like that. But yeah, that's all the decks that we had access to. Again, we don't have the entirety of the top 16 posted yet, and I'm sure we will eventually, but I think we did get to see every, like, cool deck that made top 16. I think the other decks might just be more of, like, you know, what you usually see, unlike these crazy rogues, like the Palkia Gholdengo deck, the Roaring Moon Darkrai deck, and then, of course, the Zeraora VMAX Arc Pile deck. But yeah, really cool stuff. Japan's always cooking, and it's always cool to see these decks do well to end off the year. The one thing to note is, will this mean that Gholdengo is finally going to get results in America? Will we finally see a Gholdengo in Day 2 in an American tournament? Who knows? Will it get Day 2 at Portland? Hopefully this inspires people to play Gholdengo more. I think Gholdengo has potential. We just, unfortunately, haven't been able to see it reach that full potential yet. But now, after these results, hey, maybe it's time for Gholdengo. We'll have to see where these Arc Piles go. Will Arc Zeraora become a thing? We'll have to see on that one. But that'll be for me on today's video. I will leave a link down below once again to Pokemon Book if you want to go check it out yourself and look at all these deck lists. That'll be for me. If you all enjoyed the video, leave a like if you're new to the channel. Again, subscribe down below. We are getting very, very close to 10,000 subs. So once again, if you want to be that 10,000th subscriber, make sure to subscribe down below and all that good stuff. And I'll see you on another video here on the second channel soon. Bye-bye.